everybody. Welcome to our first official episode of Own the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians.
Hey, Jodi, who came up with that?
I think you came up with that. You're a smart boy.
I think it's pretty good.
That's why I keep you around.
It also makes a lot of sense. I know we kind of went over this in the little, recap sort of, jump off, but just to reiterate, the approach here is a simple one.
We just want to make car stuff simple for Canadians. That is our mission statement.
Well, no, and to be fair, others are welcome too. This isn't exclusive to Canadians. It's just that.
But AutoTrader is Canadian. We're based in Toronto.
We are.
So welcome to our episode on Intro to Greener Driving, because it is April, and April is Earth Month.
That's it, Earth Month. I think I called it Green Month last
Oh, it's
time.
all the same. I don't really care about that. But we're going to be talking all about greener driving. So we're going to hit some fuel saving tips. We're going to talk about the differences between the different types of electrified vehicles. We're going to hit you with a bit of news. And we'll go from there.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
That sounds good to me.
All right, cool. So thank you for joining us today. Let's get right into it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to first go over the difference between hybrids, PHEVs.
You mean PHEVs?
PHEVs. I hate saying PHEVs. I don't think that's a thing that normal people say, but it stands for plug-in hybrid electric vehicle.
Yep.
And EVs. And kind of the pros and cons of each, because I think that with these like crazy high gas prices, the interest in electrified vehicles has like definitely shot up.
Totally.
And our like AutoTrader data shows that like people have become a lot more interested through their search history and stuff like that. So let's start with hybrids. So maybe let's go through what is a hybrid and kind of the pros and cons of a hybrid.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys know at least somewhat, like a hybrid would utilize two fuel sources, right? And of course, most commonly gas and electricity. So it's not something that can run, strictly on electric power.
Yeah, so for a hybrid, you don't plug it in, and you cannot plug it in.
No.
And so what happens is that the gas engine charges the battery.
It works in conjunction with, a battery. So Toyota's a good example, right? And it uses two electric motor generators up front. One of them that puts energy into the battery pack, and one of them that drives the wheels. And then that works in conjunction with the gas engine. Like you said, it'll work to either charge or drive the wheels. So with a little bit heavier foot, it's going to propel you forward. When you let off, it's going to allow that to spin in reverse, one of the motor generators to spin in reverse, and that's going to put energy into the battery.
Yeah, and so, like you mentioned the Prius, that is probably the most popular and well-known hybrid out there. These days, there are so many different options. And I really like hybrid vehicles because they're very easy to get used to. Like, even if you've never driven a hybrid or an electric vehicle before, a hybrid vehicle works pretty much like a normal conventional gas-powered car.
Oh, totally. My hot take, there is no reason any of you and us, shouldn't be driving hybrids. If you're not ready for electrification, a hybrid will do. And there's hybrid pickup trucks now, hybrid minivans, sedans. Crossovers. Like, there is no excuse to not look at them. And whether it's, if you were concerned that they feel underpowered, well, trust me, if you drive the Ford F-150 hybrid or, the Toyota Tundra hybrid that's on its way, you're not going to have any concerns about, underpowered. Those can tow just like a normal truck, only they, burn way less gas. It's very handy.
And that is the real reason why anyone would consider a hybrid. So like hybrids are usually like a little bit more expensive than their gas-powered counterparts, but like not a dramatic difference.
No.
And the savings that you have in fuel are wild. So like just as an example, recently I was driving a Lexus NX 350h. It is their new hybrid crossover, compact luxury crossover. I was getting like 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers.
Yeah, and when I tested the F-150 hybrid last year, remember I drove like some crazy number, like 1,200 kilometers, and I averaged 9.8 liters per 100.
For a full-size truck.
Yeah, and that was like city highway, off-road, like it was a well-rounded test, and it's amazing just how little fuel it can burn, and there's lots of benefits. They all, I think automakers are aware that they need to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. So Ford is another great example with that onboard inverter, so you can use the truck as essentially a generator to run all kinds of stuff. And that's just a nice, it's handy because if you tow a trailer, you can plug your trailer directly into the truck and keep the fridge on, so you don't have to worry about how you're going to get your food to that campsite however far away it is, because you can just have everything running and just plug it straight into the back of the truck.
It's such a handy feature to have, and you even said it was like your favorite feature of that entire truck.
It might still be my favorite feature of the last 2 years.
Wow, really?
Like, I just think it's so amazing. When my friends and I went camping with the gas model, we like brought a projector and a sheet and like hung it from the trees and watched movies.
That's so cool.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
The way you camp is like unreal because it's so fancy.
Yeah, like my friends took to calling me the Sultan because I have this massive tent and I like had a carpet because I don't want to track dirt into my tent, right? So
But you're camping, isn't that just like a normal thing that I don't camp?
Not
like
for
I
me.
hate camping, but
yeah, I'm not that kind of camper.
So yeah, hybrids, tons of benefits. No real downside to hybrids.
No.
They also use regenerative braking to help charge the batteries, which is really cool.
And I think, that's actually something that we can demystify. Our first demystification, if I could play an effect of like, yeah, like this would be it. Okay. Regenerative brakes are not brakes. And this is, I think, something that's misunderstood. It's actually just the electric motor cycling in reverse, right? And I had a question about this recently with an electric vehicle that I drove, and a viewer of the video, I think it was the Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid.
Cool.
And he had said he kind of was having a hard time wrapping his head around how it worked. And when you think about it, it's just like your vacuum at home or whatever, anything that's got like a brushless or a let's say a drill, right? An electric drill. It's a brushless motor. So as quickly as it spins forward, as soon as you let go of that trigger, it stops. And then if you flick the switch and you can spin it in reverse. Well, basically, an electric motor works in that same way in a vehicle where as soon as you let off the accelerator, as long as the regenerative braking is enabled, it'll just cycle in reverse, and that's going to take that kinetic energy and put it into the battery pack, so you're not wasting anything. And so that's hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and electric vehicles all have that feature.
And it's really beneficial because it means also less wear and tear on your brakes, because it's not actually using those brakes to slow down the car.
Yeah, it's really, and then that one pedal driving takes it a step further, so it can actually bring vehicles to a halt. Now, hybrids don't have one pedal driving, but some plug-ins do nowadays, and electric cars do.
And so one cool thing about hybrids is that some of them allow you to run in a fully EV mode, but it's all automatic, so you don't really have to think about it, which is why I love hybrids so much. So whenever it requires not a lot of power, so like when you're parking or idling or like low speed or even just like maintaining a coast, it'll go in EV. And I think that is so cool and does it automatically. Like in that Lexus I was driving, it will also show you the portion of your drive that was done in EV mode. And I was up to like 60-something% at one point.
Yeah, I really do like that. And that's something that I think, again, needs to be kind of, demystified in a sense, is that there's no dedicated electric driving range, which is important to note. So a plug-in hybrid, it's got a bigger battery pack. You can charge it overnight, and you might get, let's say anywhere from about 25 to 60 kilometers is usually about the average. But when you're taking a look at a hybrid, it doesn't have that same capability, but it will add up over time. And it's really great when they have that kind of gamified, like you can challenge yourself, right? So you were doing, I remember you told me with the NX and you were super excited. And back when I tested the Ford Escape hybrid, I did it too. And trying to hit that 50-50 balance was always nice where, oh, okay, I just did that drive and 48% was under electric propulsion. So I'm going to try a little harder next time. And yeah, I really do appreciate that. And I think that's another thing that might be misunderstood of how they work, is that it can operate under electrification, just not in the same way as a plug-in hybrid or an electric.
Yeah, but I love hybrids because they're like basically turnkey and go. You don't have to think about it, and your gains in fuel economy are going to be so noticeable. And so, yeah, there's really no downside to having a hybrid. But moving on to PHEV, so that's plug-in hybrid electric vehicle.
You mean PHEV? I'm going to do it every time.
I don't like saying it. It sounds weird.
No, that's what it is. It's a PHEV.
Okay, so PHEV, I don't like it. I'm not
All right.
gonna do. Anyway, like Dan said, they usually have a bigger battery pack, and it runs in conjunction with a gas-propelled engine.
So same as the hybrid that we just went through. So, it's got a couple in the case of Toyota again, it's got a couple motor generators to go with a gas engine, but with a bigger battery pack. So you might have, like, let's say a couple kilowatt hour battery pack in a hybrid, and then you might get like a 17 kilowatt hour battery pack in a plug-in hybrid. And that means if you hook it up at home overnight, or even on level 2 charging, some of them have level 2 capability, you can get that, like I said, 25 to 60 kilometers is about average for plug-ins.
Yeah, and so for a plug-in hybrid, you get smaller range, but once that range is depleted, it'll just default to using the gas. So it's
it operates
easy.
like a hybrid essentially at that point, right?
Yeah.
Not all of them are created equal, and that's another thing that
they are a little bit different depending on like which automaker it is. But Dan had a really good experience with that Kia Sorento PHEV that you drove a while ago, where basically he discovered that, like, unless you're plugging it in every day to maximize the time spent in EV mode, it's not really worth it, because one of the things about PHEVs is that they are significantly more expensive than their gas-powered counterparts, right?
Totally. And, and for that, it was like, that's a good example of it, where the Sorento isn't quite as efficient. So I think I averaged right around, it was something like, 9.5 liters per 100 kilometers once the battery was depleted. Whereas if you look at a Toyota RAV4 Prime, which is the plug-in hybrid version, that is about as efficient as the conventional hybrid once the battery's used up. So it just depends on, the make and model, how, what kind of like that series hybrid system, how
Right.
it works. And yeah, that's an example of why I think for a lot of people, let's say you live outside the city and your commute is more than about 50 kilometers and you don't have access to charging at the office as well as at home, then the conventional hybrid is going to make more sense. I think for a lot of people, especially around town, a plug-in hybrid is a great option because, especially with low speed, because again, using the regenerative brakes, and stoplight to stoplight, that's another thing that we should cover, is that traditionally, gas-powered vehicles are more efficient on the highway than they are in the city, whereas hybrids and electrics are the opposite of that, because they can rely on that electrification and those regenerative brakes. So they tend to burn less, whatever fuel source you're talking about, around town. And so that's one of those things where a plug-in hybrid is going to make a lot of sense for somebody who maybe has to commute from one end of town to the other, and it's only about 30 kilometers or so, and it's not, very burdensome.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're coming from, let's say Kitchener to Toronto, like the conventional hybrid is going to be the better choice.
Yeah, so I know some people who own plug-in hybrids, and they really love it because they're like, I haven't put in gas in my car for like 2 months. It's because they're they restrict themselves to like a radius so they can get all their errands done only on electric power, which is so cool to me. But the key is that you really have to be able to plug it in as much as you can. And PHEVs are kind of like, PHEVs are kind of a good like in-between step between a conventional gas-powered car and a full EV.
Yeah, and then, it's one of those things, right? Everybody's got their preference in that, in that realm. I do think it comes down to, your use case, but my big thing really is, if you're in the market for a new vehicle, it's 2022, like if you're not looking at one of these, alternative powered vehicles, if you can really call them that anyways, but if you're not looking at a hybrid or a plug-in or a full electric car now, like it's just silly, because there's no sense in burning more gas than you need to. It's that simple to me.
It's true, yeah. And so, like, for me personally, I would love to get an EV, which is what we're going to move on to next. But the only caveat is that, like, I and Dan, too, we live in buildings that don't have chargers. And so, because we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves now, but like the public charging infrastructure isn't amazing right now.
That's so polite. I would call it I think I called it deplorable in an opinion piece I
It's
wrote.
true.
It's
We'll get
terrible.
back to that
Yeah.
later. But like, let's kind of go through EVs. So EVs are like, there's so much buzz around EVs right now. You know, Tesla.
I see what you did there.
I didn't even do that on purpose. But Tesla really did a lot in like making EVs like cool and mainstream and desirable. And so a lot of other automakers kind of like had to catch up to Tesla and their like level of innovation. But an electric vehicle runs solely on battery power.
Yeah.
There's no gasoline used at all. They are completely silent, which is really cool. Typically these days you can get around like 250 to like 500 kilometers
Yeah, I think that's
of
a
range.
safe range. Some do better, and obviously, like more modern ones are going to be a little bit, have a little bit better range because they have, improved technology, more cells. That's the big thing with battery tech, right? Is like to be able to squeeze more cells into the same, kind of footprint, for lack of a better term. Yeah, but they don't. There's no gas, so that is the issue for some people. Is like, well, range anxiety, or I like to, go. I like to drive to Montreal a couple times a year, and it's like, I get that, right? And that's why, again, that infrastructure needs to get better. But my thing is, I think EVs make a lot of sense as kind of like a second vehicle
For sure.
for a lot of households. I know they're expensive, and especially now, like things aren't getting, any cheaper these days. But the reality is, what is it, 2035? The federal government has that target that internal combustion powered vehicles will no longer be sold.
Yep.
And that includes hybrids. There's no gas powered vehicles.
Yeah, and so that means pretty much that by that time, every new vehicle that we will be able to buy will be an EV, and that's in about 10 years. So that's going to creep up on us real fast.
And again, to just kind of, make sure that you guys understand that it's new vehicles. So it's not like the government's gonna, go put out to pasture your 20-year-old
Yeah, like they're not
car.
going to throw it in the dump. Yeah.
No, it's just that you won't be able to buy new. And again, that is a target. It's not necessarily a mandate like 100%. I feel like it is going to shift potentially. One other note on the kind of EV side that I think another hot take, because why not, right? That's why we're here. I really wish hydrogen was a bigger deal.
You know what? The hydrogen-powered EVs made a lot of sense in concept, but the problem is that there was zero infrastructure to support it.
Yeah.
There was like one hydrogen refueling system in the province?
I think, so I don't think there's any publicly accessible in Ontario.
Right.
And then there's something like, a half dozen in BC, and then a couple in Quebec, and that's it.
Yeah. So the backstory with hydrogen is that you would go to a station to refuel it. It was very fast.
Yeah, like 5 minutes.
To refuel a whole tank, and the only waste would be water.
Yeah, literally just your tailpipe emissions is just water droplets.
Yeah, and so all of the benefits of EVs were there except the infrastructure, right?
That's, I think, what the failing is. Because there's no mining like that. That's a concern, I think, with when you're looking at cobalt mining and everything for these battery packs. I really wish that there was some more foresight, because Toyota's got the Mirai, which I haven't driven, but our colleagues that have driven it have said it's very good. Hyundai has, what was it called, the Nexo fuel cell vehicle. It's such a cool concept because, like you said, it behaves exactly like an electric vehicle, but it doesn't take as long to fill up. You don't have to plug it in, and it's just, and that goes back to our infrastructure troubles in this country,
Yeah, so I've done a lot of time in EVs. I've taken them on long road trips, and like, for example, I've driven from Toronto to like Kingston on fully EV couple times.
You and your mom did that big road trip a couple winters ago, remember? You went down and picked her up, and you guys went to like Buffalo or something. You did some
Yeah, and like they
shopping.
live out in St. Catharines and I live in Toronto, so that's like a pretty long haul. And so what I discovered with the public infrastructure for charging is that like it's just not very good for many reasons. So first of all, in most of these chargers, you can't use a credit card to pay easily. So they force you to have an app, and then you have to load money into the app, and then you can charge. If the chargers are even working, because half the time they're broken.
Yeah, I've had a lot of trouble with that. It's very frustrating. And then just, you know, the lack of chargers around. Again, like Jodi said, neither of us live in buildings with chargers. I live in Port Credit, so, you know, the south part of Mississauga, right by the water, and there are 2 publicly accessible chargers in my entire neighborhood. It's it's very busy.
And that's not enough.
No, and one of them is at a grocery store, and it's like, you know, a trickle of a charger, and then another one is at a bank. Those are my only 2 options.
Yeah, and those aren't even the fast ones,
No.
right? Those are only level 2s.
Yeah, the closest fast charger is like 50 kilometers from my house.
To which point it's like that you're going to spend all of your range driving to get it charged, right? And so while I'm a huge fan of EVs, I really do think that the infrastructure has to get better before, you know, EVs can become mainstream. That being said, if you have a house with a garage and you are able to install your own level 2 EV charger, it's a no-brainer for me. Like if I had that access to garage space, an EV would be my next car for sure.
Yeah, so that, you know, I mean, I'm not an electrician, and of course it's going to change province to province, territory to territory, but, you know, budget a couple grand to have a level 2 charger installed at home. But the good thing is a lot of provinces and territories that offer EV rebates also offer rebates on having those chargers installed. So basically you buy one, you have your receipt from an electrician. So as long as it's not like, you know, a friend doing it for you on the side, you know, you can get some of that money back.
Yeah.
And that's the other cool thing. If you guys are in the market for, you know, let's say an electric or a plug-in hybrid vehicle, those are what qualify for rebates. I think that's another thing that people don't understand is it's not necessarily, the onus isn't on you as the consumer anymore. In a lot of cases, the dealers will do it for you.
Yeah, they'll do all the paperwork so you don't have
and
to.
They'll give you the money up front.
Yep.
So it's very cool that you don't have to, you know, kind of jump through those hoops. Lots of dealers will take care of that, and it just makes it a little easier. So let's say you buy something and it qualifies for the full $5,000 federal zero emission vehicle rebate, $5,000 off. The dealer will just knock that right off the purchase price.
Yep, so it's instant savings.
And that is something that I think is maybe misunderstood about, you know, the process of buying. In lots of provinces, it's really too bad that Ontario doesn't offer a rebate anymore. I'd like to see it, you know, in some of the prairie provinces as well. But BC, Quebec, virtually every maritime province, and I'm pretty sure Yukon also has an EV rebate. They vary, you know, in amounts, and then there's also that federal one. So, you know, I think that's another piece of the puzzle, right? Is that if we're going to hit that 2035 kind of target of cutting gas-powered vehicles, like there's going to have to be some, because they, like you said, they are expensive, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And especially if you don't have a charger at home, charging publicly can be expensive. So it's just a lot more affordable, even after you consider the cost of installing the charger to charge an EV at home.
Yeah.
Like one of our writers did a comparison of how much it would cost to drive 100 kilometers. And if he's charging at home, it was like 10 times less expensive than driving with gas.
Yeah, like it might cost you a few bucks. You know, if you're charging off peak, that's another one, right? Is make sure you charge overnight, you know, off peak hydro rates. It's going to cost you, you're not even going to notice it.
Yeah, it's just a little blip. And so to me, I love EVs. I would love to get an EV, but it would really be dependent on my building, like offering a charging solution.
Yeah.
So that's our kind of breakdown on hybrids, PHEVs, and EVs. If you guys have any questions about any of that stuff, please email us at expert@trader.ca. Our next episode is going to be focusing purely on EVs, electric vehicles. So if you have any questions, let us know. I think it'll be a really great chance for you to kind of ask us things that you think are silly, but trust me, they're not silly. They're really good questions. But I did want to talk about a little bit of EV news.
Yep.
And so one of the biggest, most highly anticipated, like literal biggest electric vehicles coming out is the new GMC Hummer EV. Pickup truck.
Yeah.
So we just ran our first drive review. You can catch it at autotrader.ca/editorial. And this thing is wild.
Yeah. It's huge. It's like, literally like 10 feet wide. Like it's massive.
I mean, you know what the old Hummers look like. It's like that, except it's way more spacey looking, kind of crazy. And our writer who was down, I think it was in California or something.
Arizona.
Oh, Arizona, driving the Hummer EV pickup, sent me this video. And it is so physically wide that it needed 3 wipers.
Yeah. It's a little, I mean, at some point, I think Chris, in his review, I don't want to give too much away because I really do think, you guys would benefit from reading it. But like he said, is it really that eco-friendly to drive an electric vehicle that huge? And
he made a really good point where he was like, I don't know why this vehicle exists, but I'm really happy it does. It's so extra, and it doesn't need to be that extra, but I think it's cool that it did it anyway. So I just wanted to go through some of the specs don't make sense to me because they're so out there. So it has about over 500 kilometers of range. Great. Which is crazy considering how big and heavy it is for them to get that much range. Can you explain to me how it has 11,500 pound-feet of torque?
I can, because it doesn't.
I mean, yeah, I just want you to go through how they come up with that number.
Yeah, so GM hasn't officially, explained it, but to kind of break it down is when you see the torque number, so let's say a Toyota Corolla, 2-liter, it's got 151 pound-feet of torque. That's measured at the flywheel, which is attached to the engine. It's the crankshaft. It's what is on the end where the pistons. That's what gets the whole thing moving.
Yeah, it's how you get power to the wheels.
Yeah, and so that's where it's traditionally measured. Whereas that astronomical number that GM provides is in all likelihood a measurement of the torque at the wheels, and it kind of uses the kind of gear ratio and the axle ratios to its advantage. So, it's probably it's still going to be a ton. It's going to be probably close to 1,000 horsepower or pound-feet of torque in practicality. But yeah, in reality, that's just GM trying to.
So it's basically just like a brag that's 100%. Not super accurate.
Because it's actually if big heavy-duty diesel trucks, if you were using that same measurement, would make even more torque than that.
Okay. So that's good to know. So just when you see numbers like that, kind of think to yourself that there's more to the story.
Wait, let's call it this. When in doubt, check it out. Or better yet, email expert@trader.ca.
That's exactly what we should do. We want to hear your questions. And so the Hummer EV has 3 electric motors, 1 powering the front wheels and 2 powering each of the rear wheels.
Yep.
This thing, which is the size of a house, can accelerate from 0 to 100 in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, it's extra.
Which is so extra. Why do you even need to do that? And one of the things that I thought was so funny about the Hummer EV is that it has a WTF mode, which is watts to freedom.
Yeah.
And it's basically their launch control mode.
Yeah.
And so you would use launch control if you're drag racing somebody.
Yeah.
And so why would this huge truck need to have it?
Yeah, it's funny. Part of what I'm realizing more is I think, automakers have tried the traditional route of just being oh, check out this efficient vehicle, right? So, Chevy had the Volt years ago, which was, a little bit of a cheater car, I would call it, because it was an EV, but it also had a gas engine.
But they used it as a generator, not to drive.
Well, so that's the thing, right? It's because they, Chevy said, well, it's not directly powering the wheels. but it was just like this little kind of quirky looking sedan. And then the Bolt came out, which is still quirky, but a little more conventional as far as, you know, it just being like a hatchback. And they've been fairly popular, but EVs still kind of lack, aside from Tesla, lack that you know, just general, like the mass appeal. So
like
I
the
think,
wow factor.
yeah, so I think, no, now that's what I think
Yeah.
they're doing is like, okay, you guys weren't happy with just it being efficient and a kind of more eco-friendly choice. So how about we give you like Murica, you know, in a, like it's huge, it's unnecessary. Is it gonna, you know, appeal to
People are like talking about it and they're excited about it, which I think is really cool because I love to see people getting excited about EVs, even if they're crazy extra EVs like this. But yeah, it's very like America. They've hidden little American flags everywhere as Easter eggs.
There's a bunch of other Easter eggs too. Some of them are like a little, you know, more egregious than others. There's if you look at some of the icons in the infotainment screen, like one of them has like a silhouette of a Hummer EV pickup driving over a Cybertruck, which is Tesla's, you know, alleged.
That's fighting words.
Yeah, that's Tesla's alleged entry in the EV truck
and
game.
so for some background, Tesla came out with the Cybertruck. It was like basically a triangle.
A cheese wedge.
A cheese wedge, if you will. And no one's seen it yet. And
well, they've had this one prototype that's been roaming around, and in the time that since Tesla has announced it, you know, this technically is a pickup, the Hummer EV. The Ford F-150 Lightning is like around the corner. Chevy has announced the Silverado EV, which is cool because it uses the same, you know, powertrain as the Hummer, but it's just going to be a little more practical and
less flashy, but still really, really good.
And probably a lot more affordable. Rivian with the is it R1T or RT1? Anyways, one of those.
But there was this big race from all of the automakers to be the first to the market with an electric truck, right? And so these little fun Easter eggs are like jabs at each other, like, haha, I did it first, which I think is like fun. So like lots of little Easter eggs in the Hummer EV. I can't wait to drive it. I think it is just so incredibly silly.
Yeah, same.
But so exciting at the same time.
Oh, and we should talk about the whole crab walk thing.
Oh yeah, so this Hummer EV has rear wheels that can turn independently of the front wheels.
Like they turn, so you know, it's not really like a new concept. And for GM, I even remember years ago, like early 2000s, there was a GMC Sierra Denali pickup, and it had quadra-steer. It's what GM calls its four-wheel steering system. And even before that, Mazda's had four-wheel steering, and
Honda
had it.
Too.
The Prelude.
Yeah.
But so how it works, and you know, quadra-steer was the same way, is that at high speed, all four wheels would turn in the same direction. So if you were changing lanes, it was just very easy to shift.
Right.
At lower speeds, the rear wheels would turn in the opposite direction of the front to give you a tighter turning circle. And then with the Hummer EV, it's gone to a new level because the wheels, there's no axle connecting them. You know, they can turn on those kind of electric motors. So it does what GM is calling the crab walk.
So it can basically drive like diagonally, which is really interesting. And for a vehicle that is this like physically large, being able to like kind of shrink its turning circle will be massive for just like driving in normal roads.
Totally. And that it seems, you know, the auto industry goes through these phases, right? Of like, you know, what's a cool feature, what's something that's interesting. So I think, you know, Rivian has tank turn, which is like the same.
It's a similar concept.
Crab, and then Ford, even with the Bronco, you know, moving away from EVs for a second, trail turn assist, which basically just like locks the inside rear wheel so that you can have a tighter turning radius. So it's just one of those gimmicky. I think Chris said in his the whole crab walk thing is so silly, and like you're never going to use it.
They basically made it to show off on TikTok.
Exactly,
like it's one of those features that you would make a TikTok about, go viral, and show all your friends and family, but like you'll never actually use it in real life.
Yeah.
So it's cool, but again, like so extra, totally unnecessary.
Especially, you know, in Canada, I've been lucky enough to go four-wheeling, you know, in a lot of places, and oftentimes they're narrow trails, so a vehicle like this Hummer just isn't going to get there in the first place.
You physically won't fit without like destroying a lot of nature.
Yeah, like tread lightly is, you know, a
Yeah.
concept that you should be following. So I mean, I don't really see it having practical use, but
No, I think people like if you're people who can afford a Hummer EV for the first place because it's
Yeah.
like 6 figures. It's
Yeah.
very expensive. Nobody's going to be off-roading it, right? Like
no, when I saw that, I was asking WTF and not Watts to Freedom, you know? It was really,
it's a question we all had.
yeah.
So yeah, that's all about the Hummer EV. There's so many interesting facts about this truck. But yeah, just check out our review on autotrader.ca/editorial. It's a really entertaining, fun car review for a really fun and entertaining new car.
And, you know, Chris is such a great writer and
Yeah.
really, you know, again, we've talked about it's like that concept of kind of simplifying things and I think Chris did a really great job with that, you know.
This Hummer EV review, you can read it. Like my mom would be able to read it and totally understand what's going on. And that's the vibe we're going for here. Making car stuff simple. So yeah, that's the Hummer EV. It's time for Ask an Expert.
All right.
We need some kind of like some
Yeah.
kind of music for Ask an Expert. And so because it is Earth Month, we had some questions about easy ways to save fuel.
Okay, yeah.
That don't include just not driving. Because I asked Dan a couple weeks ago, I'm like, Dan, I need some easy ways to save fuel. He just looked at me and said, don't drive.
Well, it's because I'm excited. It's
I was
biking
like, no,
season.
stupid. Don't say
No,
that.
it's biking season. I'm excited to get out on my mountain bike, so that's all I had in my mind. But
I get that too, but for some people, that's not an option.
Totally.
So for me, one of the biggest things I do to reduce my fuel consumption is just drive a lot more gently, which I know sounds silly, but if you're racing from stoplight to stoplight, like just flooring it each time, you're burning a lot of fuel that you don't need to be.
And, you know, there are actually studies that have looked into, you know, kind of speed and how that affects it. And it's very true. Like, you know, because you can look at it, you know, in your gauge cluster, you look at your TAC, right? That's showing you your engine speed. Well, at 120, if it's running at like 2,500 RPM versus 110 is running at like 2,100, well, the slower your engine's turn, RPM is revolutions per minute. So the slower your engine is operating, the less fuel it needs to do that, which means you're going to burn less. And every car has a sweet spot, right?
Yep.
So some of them, it does vary because gear ratios and all that stuff. But like when you own a car, you drive it enough, you're going to find the sweet spot as long as you're paying attention to it. So some cars just have that kind of optimal, you know, operating range. I remember I had my Subaru Outback and like 108 was the perfect highway speed where I would get, you know, sub 9 liters per 100 kilometers. Often in the summertime, it was like in the 7s and on the highway, and it was amazing. And I just find like driving slower, it's better. It burns less gas. It's
Less stressful. It's
totally,
safer.
totally. You're not on edge, and so there's lots of benefits. Another one, simple one, make sure you have the proper air pressure in your tires.
That's a big one.
It's huge, and it can actually have such a huge impact on how much gas you're burning.
Yeah, because if your tires are underinflated, your car is using so much more effort to get those wheels going, which means you're burning a lot more fuel.
Totally. And another little tip, use the sticker in your door jamb and not what the tire says. What's on the tire is the maximum PSI that tire is rated for. What's in the door jamb is the recommended tire pressure for your vehicle. And quite often it'll have, you know, a winter tire pressure versus an all-season pressure, and it'll have it based on, you know, if you have it fully loaded with people and stuff versus if it's empty.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so make sure, you know, and it's usually in that kind of, you know, high 20s to mid 30s on average. Make sure you've got the right tire pressure, and you will notice that your fuel bill will be dramatically lower.
That's a really good tip. The other one I like to tell people is like, don't drive on your winter tires all year round. I know it can be tempting because like I just forget to change them sometimes.
Especially
or I
with
don't
the
have
pandemic,
time.
people driving less.
Yeah, but winter tires use a lot more. Well, not a lot more, but like enough. more fuel that you'll notice.
Yeah, unless so last year, for years I've been talking to people about that. If you don't want to change them, if it's too much of a hassle, there are what are called all-weather tires, and it basically just means it's the best of both worlds. It's not quite as efficient in the summertime as an all-season. It's not quite as winter kind of, I don't want to say winter optimized, maybe is a good way to
Sure.
put it, as a full winter tire, but it's close. And they are proper winter rated. That little mountain snowflake symbol, that's the rubber, the industry association's designation for a winter tire. All-weather tires are winter rated. That's what I have on my car because I drive it so little. And I've got to say, like, so far, I put them on last September, and I've been doing phenomenal as far as my fuel efficiency with those tires.
And it was
outside
a
of winter.
noticeable difference from your other tires?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
See, that's so important, right?
Yeah.
Another tip I like to tell people is, like, if your car has an eco mode, use it.
Yeah, totally.
It kind of restricts how much you could throttle or how
like
quickly
your
you can
throttle response.
accelerate.
And I do have to kind of give Hyundai and Kia like a little shout out because usually you've got eco mode, normal, and sport, right? And then Hyundai and Kia introduced a smart mode, and what it means is basically it's an eco mode, but it recognizes when you might be driving with a heavier foot. Let's say you're merging onto the highway.
Right.
So it'll give you the sport level performance, but then it'll automatically default back. So you're not switching between modes. But 100%, every vehicle I drive, virtually every week, I'm in a new vehicle. And one of the first things I do, if it has an eco mode, that's what I set it in. Obviously, I test all the modes because, that's part of my job. But my default mode of choice, unless it's some, performance vehicle, is eco mode because I don't, what's the point of burning fuel unnecessarily?
Yeah, that's a good one. And in a similar vein, if your vehicle has cruise control, I would recommend using cruise control,
Yeah.
especially if it's like a wide open highway drive with nobody there.
Yeah.
You set your cruise control, and that way you're not losing, you're not wasting fuel, like losing speed and then gaining it again, which is a big one.
Oh, it's not green related, but cruise control related. I did just drive GM's latest version of Super Cruise.
Right.
And I'll tell you, that is a game changer.
It's the future.
Jodi and I, before we started recording today, we're talking, and I'm still not convinced that autonomous vehicles, like full autonomous vehicles, will ever really become a thing that we can buy. But semi-autonomous ones, I think that's where there's an opening. And so Super Cruise, for those of you who don't know, Super Cruise is an advanced version of an already advanced adaptive cruise control. So with Super Cruise, it works on divided highways. GM so far has mapped like 320,000 kilometers throughout the States and Canada. You engage adaptive cruise control, and then you hit a button on the steering wheel, and what it does is it lets you drive completely hands-free.
And as of right now, that is the only system available that you can do that with.
Yeah, and so that is an important one.
Legally.
There are no self-driving cars. This is as close as you will get on the market right now. GM has plans to roll it out in like 23 vehicles for the 22 model year. And it uses a little infrared camera on the steering column. It's got this green light bar on the steering wheel, and then it's got prompts in the instrument cluster. But as long as you're paying attention to the road, because the onus is still on you as the driver, it will do everything on the highway on its own, right down to now the latest version that I just tested can change lanes either fully automatically or on demand. So like, BMW and Mercedes, you can activate the signal stalk and it'll change lanes on its own. So you don't actually have to like turn the wheel, but your hands are still on it. With this one, it'll do that. So you can reach over and, tap the signal and it'll do it. But if you have it set to the automated feature,
Cool.
It'll approach slower traffic. And as long as the left lane is open, it'll just move right over, move around them, and then automatically switch back into the center lane.
That must have been so trippy to experience, but like, wow.
But so that was the thing, and I went into it thinking like, okay, because I've driven some adaptive cruise systems where with my hands on the wheel, I don't fully trust it. This was like a very, disarming system. I almost immediately, I didn't feel, like I kind of was uncomfortable with what it was doing. It just was very well measured, very balanced. And the other cool thing is, for all, you truck owners out there who might be interested, you can tow with it.
What?
Which is amazing.
That's so cool.
And this is something that I've, said for years now is like, you're well within your rights to use cruise control when you're towing on the highway. Let's say you live in Alberta, Saskatchewan, like those are some long hauls, some straight flat roads. But you shouldn't use adaptive cruise control currently. But Super Cruise and Ford, to its credit, with its Blue Cruise, which is, Ford's version of Super Cruise, is apparently going to allow you to do the same thing. I didn't get a chance to test the towing capabilities, but GM is very confident that this will do everything that I experienced with a trailer on the back too.
That's a game changer, I think, for a lot of truck drivers. That'll be amazing.
I think this is, that's what I think the future of highway driving is one of these, hands-free semi-autonomous systems.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, that's our Ask an Expert segment for Own the Road. If you have questions to ask us, please send them to expert@trader.ca. We're going to pick a couple and try to answer them in every single episode, so we would love to hear from you. You can find our content on autotrader.ca/expert. We have news, reviews, how-tos, top 10s, expert reviews. I already said that. Lots of really cool stuff on there. We're on TikTok because we're cool.
Yeah.
You'll see Dan and I a lot on our TikTok. You can find us on YouTube.
Yep.
All of your regular podcast subscribers. And our next episode, we're going to be talking specifically about EVs, electric vehicles, because there's so much to go through.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that one.
Some other, EV news that'll still be pretty fresh, I think, is, GM just announced big plans to produce electrified vehicles in Oshawa, and LG and Stellantis, so the former Chrysler Corp / former Fiat Chrysler. There's a big new battery plant being built in Windsor, and that's really cool. And Ford has said that it plans to build electrified vehicles in Oakville as well.
Cool.
And, it's something I was thinking about this morning, right, is that, a lot of talk about we need to kind of work on our national, electric vehicle strategy. And as much as that's true for, ownership and infrastructure, the auto industry really is centralized to Ontario, and that's just proximity to Michigan, the Rust Belt in general. There's so much auto production around there. But, it's cool to see because Toyota builds hybrids in Cambridge and has for a long time and is now building that Lexus NX that you just drove. So basically not plug-in hybrids at the moment, but I'm sure that is something that's going to be on its way. But it's great to see, these big automakers making some investments in Ontario auto manufacturing to have some of that produced right here at home.
I think that's super cool because it helps future-proof our local manufacturing scene, which is so important to the economy. So I love to see that.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us on this first episode of Own the Road with AutoTrader. We hope you subscribe and like our stuff. If you have any feedback, again, you can email us at expert@trader.ca. But until next time, thank you so much.
See you guys.
Bye.